speakers for this session, but not least, I'm sure, is Group M39, developing an animatronic Kōkako for the South Island Kōkako Trust.
Thank you everyone for coming to our presentation. It's great to have you here today, especially the members of the South Island Kōkako Charitable Trust, who are our clients. I'm going to start us off with a karakia and then we'll talk about our project for this year. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, e he aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huku, he haupu, ti hei, mauri ora. I'll hand over to Will for a bit of background on our project.
Morning everyone, my name is Will. I was in charge of the electronics development for this project. As Lydia just mentioned, this is an animatronic Kōkako. So going into a bit of a history about the bird for people who don't know, early 1800s European settlers arrived in New Zealand and this caused a pretty big decline in population from both predation and habitat destruction. Flash forward a lot of years, this decline just continued and continued. We had a case in the late 1900s where there were single-digit sightings of the bird, so not too good. Regardless, there's this rumoured sighting in Reefton, but unfortunately DOC in 2008 still declares the bird as extinct. A couple of years later in 2010, the South Island Kōkako Trust, sponsors for the project, is formed with the idea to try to prove that the bird does exist. 2013, DOC goes back and reclassifies that sighting in Reefton to be official, so now the bird's no longer extinct, it's rather just data deficient. 4 years later, there's no real success in finding the bird. There's a number of rumoured sightings, but nothing official. In 2017, there's a $10,000 award put out to the community for any official sighting, so if you need any motivation for trying to help us, there you are. We come to 2024 and the Trust has reached out to UC for a final-year project making an animatronic. So, what is an animatronic? To reframe, this is a robotic bird. The Trust has a number of static models that they deploy in the bush at the moment, but they're non-moving, non-singing models, and obviously being wildlife, they've recognised that this bird is going to tend to interact with a singing and dancing model much more likely, so we'll see an example of that in a few minutes. But throughout the project, we've also been looking at the North Island Kōkako. Oh no, this video is not come up properly. Basically, one thing we were trying to reproduce throughout the project is that real snappy motion that you see in birds when they're flicking their neck around. And you can see that when we play it for you in a few minutes. Cool. Handing over to Sam and Eve for some mechanical design.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam and along with Eve we were in charge of the mechanical design on this project. So as you can probably imagine, there were some quite unique design constraints in regards to this project. Firstly, this is going to be deployed into this West Coast bush, which is one of the rainiest locations on Earth. So waterproofing was a real concern for us and something we had to consider throughout the design. As well as this, we obviously had to ensure it looked realistic from any angle and at any point in its movement, as well as being durable and resilient to any pests, insects, or other critters out in the West Coast bush. We clad it in feathers, yet we also had to retain access to all the electronics and servos for repair and maintenance. There were many ways we could have gone about actuating this animatronic, and the one we settled on was known as direct drive, which is where you place all the servo motors within the body of the animatronic itself. The benefits of this are actuation right at the source, giving very quick, snappy movements, as well as efficient use of power without a large umbilical cord of cables out of the stomach of the bird, as you see in a lot of other animatronics.
So here are a couple initial design sketches. You can see the left image shows some potential servo locations and the right some actuation techniques. So I'll now talk about the body and housing development. So this initial image here was 3D scanned given to us by Lund University in Sweden. We used this to gain all our key dimensions. We then iterated through many different housing ideas to optimize waterproofing, and you can see this final image in the center shows the driver board inside the central cavity of the bird. This is to optimize efficiency.
Yeah, and here you can see the final design of the body that we came up with. Some notable features of it are the waterproof cavity in the center for the electronics, the two non-back drivable cams that run the legs. The benefit of this is that when the model is powered off, it will retain its position instead of falling forwards. And we managed to route all electronic cables up through the legs of the bird, giving it a really nice silhouette when you see it there. Here you can see the locations of the 3 servos in the body, the one in the tail up there, as well as the 2 that drive the cam mechanisms where the dot is. Here is the head of our bird. It also contains 3 servos, 2 for pitching the head forwards and 1 for the twisting motion you just saw. The 2 pitching movements work together to generate the cobra-like or bobbing movement that you see a lot of birds produce, as well as opening the beak at the top of the movement, as you see in birds when they go to sing. Here you can see the full assembly process for the head and neck mechanism, which is quite involved, and how it then connects to the body.
So in terms of the external design of the bird, we use this image in the bottom left, which is a photograph of a real taxidermy South Island Kōkako taken from the Otago Museum. We ended up using peacock and magpie feathers as we found they absorbed the dye in the way that we wanted. You can see that image of a cow. This is a piece of fabric that wraps around the sensitive neck area. Not only does this protect and waterproof this area, but it allows us to attach all the feathers individually around here. We ended up using a very simple method of literally just hot glue gunning each feather individually.
So looking at the other half of the project, as I mentioned before, I was the electronics lead for this, so we'll go into that in a little bit of depth as well as in software. Starting off, we've got some constraints similar to the mechanical. There's a few there. Some key ones I wanted to point out were that waterproof aspect. Obviously, electronics and water don't play very nice together, so we needed to come up with a very, very clear distinction of where the electronics were and a line between where the water could get to. The other key one I wanted to point out is that long-lasting, low-power one. Obviously, this bird's being deployed into some very remote areas in New Zealand, so the rangers aren't going to be able to get to it very often. So we spec'd a battery that, under our calculations, would last a minimum of 3 weeks, if not a lot more. One thing with this battery too, we opted for a lead-acid battery rather than a different type of chemistry, just because it's being deployed in a forest, and we want to mitigate any risk of fire in there as well. Few software design requirements. Obviously, we need a bird to believe this animatronic's real, so we need all these movements to look very natural and bird-like rather than robotic. And the trust also mentioned to us that when under deployment, they wanted it to be a fairly simple user interface to set up, which we can see on the box here. It's just a few switches. Cool. Jumping into electronics a little bit more. So we have that battery I mentioned, which powers a power distribution board that we made, which gives power to all our subsystems. The system is initially woken up by a fun device called an audio monk, which is a microphone with the added benefit of having a real-time clock. So this is able to cause a trigger upon sunrise and sunset, depending on your location in the world. So this can mean that an animatronic wakes up at the dawn and dusk choruses, which is when you hear a lot of bird calls. So this will wake up our system controller, which is a wee Raspberry Pi Pico, which does 2 things simultaneously. It sends some audio files to get amplified and played over some speakers, as well as sending some control signals to our servo power and driver boards, which then synchronize those calls to prop the bird up when it's doing its call routine, as well as doing some real realistic movements. Cool. Handing over to Lydia for electronics housing.
Sweet. So right at the start of the project, it became quickly apparent that we wouldn't be able to house all the electronics we would need inside of the bird due to its small size. So we decided to go with an external housing to host the bulk of our electronics. So with this housing, we decided to purchase a readily available waterproof rated box. As mentioned, we wanted it to be waterproof. And then we made the adjustments as needed to incorporate the sound system and user interface. So if you're looking on the far left, you can see all the switches which are used to power on the bird. You can also see a strap which we've added as mentioned. The box will need to be carried into the bush, so we want to make that easy as possible. Looking towards the middle, you'll see the cables coming out of the box. Those are what we'll plug into the bird to give it life. As you may notice, they look a little bit strange. This is because we've covered the cables with woven carbon fibre material. As mentioned, pests are at risk of gnawing at the cables, so we wanted to protect them from that. You can also see the circular holes in the box. Those are actually our speakers. We've placed them either side of the box to maximise our audible range. So hopefully a Kōkako can hear it. And you can see in the upper right there, that's our audio moth. It came with a woodproof case, so we've attached it as well. Speaking of the audio moth, I'll go into that a little bit more now. So right at the start of the project, our clients indicated to us that they would like for the ability of the animatronic to wake up if a suspected South Island Kōkako is nearby. And one of the ways to do this we identified was by listening for calls. The audio moth is an open source device currently on the market that is designed for detecting and recording animal sounds in the environment. So we managed to get a hold of one of these, and I worked on finding the right calibrations of the settings to detect Kōkako calls. This was based on North Island Kōkako recordings, as we did not have any South Island Kōkako recordings available, and we were assured that this was a suitable substitute. You can see on the spectrogram on the left, we have put through a North Island Kōkako recording. The dark patches are where the audio moth is detecting a call based on our calibration. And in this recording and all the other ones that we trained it on, it picked up every call that the North Island Kōkako was making, which was a great success. We tested for false detections by making recordings at the Linwood Aviary with different types of birds, and it did not detect at all from any recordings made over there. So this was really great. And then I handed over to implement this in software to Freddie.
Hi Freddie, as Lee said, I was doing the software development for the Kōkako project. For the audio moth section, we didn't want it to just wake up during the bird calling. We wanted to play and record as well as activate the main subsystems of the bird during the dawn and dusk periods of this is where most birds usually are doing their calls. We wanted it to turn on every about 15 minutes, and this was done during the open this was done by using the open nature of the code for the audio moth. We were able to use one of the pins you see in the top right to turn on during these periods and activate the main systems of the bird. For the software side of things, we wanted to make sure that the code was very modularized, so it was able to be adapted and changed by the trust if needed to add more routines and make it more natural if needed. We were able, for the movement itself, that can be separated into two different subsections, which is the calling routines and the movements. For the calling, it uses two pins coming in through the legs of the bird to choose between one of three different calls to synchronize with the main speaker systems. For the movement itself, it uses either a sweeping routine or a random movement routine, which was gotten from the North Island Kōkakos to imitate as natural movement, like Will said as before in the constraints. The bird itself, we wanted to limit the current position to about 300 milliamps to increase the battery life of the bird, as well as using motors in sync to increase snapping movement as well as natural movement. I'll go back to Lydia for the budget for the bird.
That brings us to the end of the design, but however we also wanted to highlight that along the way we've been keeping track of our budget. While we wanted to make a quality product for our clients, we also wanted to make sure it was financially feasible in case we wanted to make multiple birds. So highlighting on this page, it costs just over $1,500 for our project this year to date. We have done calculations and believe it is around the $800 range to make a second Kōkako animatronic. And from ordering the parts to having a finished second model, we estimate it would be about 3 weeks as we prioritise making use of 3D printed materials, as well as using distributors that have easily accessible components. And we'll talk about successes now.
So to sum up, we have managed to build a realistic and workable model that is ready to go fulfill his duty out into the New Zealand bush. We've kept up to date with all timing requirements, and the bird has a very short manufacture time. We're also very excited to say that our bird will be shown in the next edition of the New Zealand Geographic, and hopefully we'll be able to help the team deploy the bird out into the able Tasman.
I would like to thank everyone that's helped us with the project, with special thanks to the Southland Kōkako Trust for putting the project forward to us, as well as the University of Canterbury staff. I would also like to put a special thanks out to our supervisor, Tim Giffney, for help throughout the project's lifespan, and thank you for all of you for coming. And as we have a presentation, we'd like to put a demonstration of the bird moving during the questions if that is.
Any questions?
I understand I've been over.
It's just going to move now, so we can't take questions.
Everyone's expecting it just to fly off.
So you said you tested it with the audio moth indoors, and then when you went outdoors, you didn't detect, it didn't pick up anything. So did you introduce the Kōkako sound outdoors to make sure that it could detect something?
Yeah, so the Kōkako recordings that we used were made by Reese from the South Island Kōkako Trust out in the wild. So there were background noises as well, and that the like whooshing that you just naturally hear in the bush. And it detected on all the recordings that we brought forward using the calibration settings. And the recordings I made at the Linwood Aviary were outdoors, and there were a variety of birds in there. So does that answer the question?
So when did you do the detection recording? Was that done indoors or done outdoors?
The detection.
Yeah.
So that was, I made the recording outdoors, and then I put it through the software. They have a software base that you can use on your computer. So I made the recording outdoors and then just uploaded it on the computer.
Okay. So do you have any concerns that when it's out in the wild and you're trying to pick things up, that it'll work while it's sitting on a branch versus inside the laboratory?
Yeah, so the audio moth itself is designed to be out in the environment. It comes with a strap. You need to strap it to a branch of a tree. Yeah, so that's why we went with it, because it was designed for that.
Cool.
Yeah.
On top of that as well, like the audio moth is the like main, like it's for detecting if there's any potential kōkako in the area, but it will wake up every day at dawn and dusk, also to do its routine, so hopefully attract birds that way as well.
Yeah, if your Kōkako is for trying to attract the birds, do you have any, would it be like a future plan or to like alert someone, like if there is one in the area, like how, what about that, how you would
Alert about the animal trial.
like if it did happen, like to like find it like in proximity, make an alert and you can investigate.
So when we deploy it, the trust has told us that there's probably going to be some trail cams set up around it, just like recording the general area. So any videos will hopefully be picked up by that, as well as the audio moth itself has an SD card on it. So if the bird's like interacting and calling back, then we can like pick up a point, or we can tell when it was like talking back and go look at those files.
So it can record audio as well.
Yeah.
You said that the birds need to wake up if it is, anything could potentially be a kōkako. How close would it need to be in order to maybe to pick up that sort of sound, the sound of a bird?
Yeah, so we haven't tested out in the bush yet. That's upcoming next. So with testing, we'll be able to figure that out. But I believe that anything within like a visible range will be able to be picked up on the recording. It's basically the same as like human hearing.
I may have missed it, but did you say how you were thinking of attaching it to the branch or a branch?
Yeah, so as you can see, we just had some blocks there for demonstration, and we heard from the trust that they actually have a tree in mind. So we're going to get some photos of that and work out how we're going to just redesign the base of that to fit to form for the tree, and figure out a solution once we know where we're putting it.
Yeah, the plan is straps if it's a branch going onto it.
And some longer wires to run down that tree.
Is there anything stopping it from being eaten?
That was a big fear of ours actually, is that it's just going to get attacked by a possum. Hopefully being off the ground, we've heard that there's some ground dwelling birds that might have a go at it, but hopefully being off the ground it'll protect it a bit. Those wires as well have carbon fibre on them, so hopefully nothing will be able to chew through those. But yeah, being in New Zealand bush, there's just always risk of interference in some way.
Vandalism and other things as well.
Yeah.
We try to make it as durable as possible, but there's always a trade-off between realism and durability.